It is March 3rd, 2025, and this is going to be my little recording of me just like rambling about my project for an hour, guided by some notes I wrote down in 10 minutes. Okay, so the guiding question of the video is, what do zoos sell you? I wrote, what do zoos tell you? That is fine. Is what do zoos sell you? I'm going to be focusing mostly on the Bronx Zoo because that's one I go to. Or that's what I've always gone to as a kid, and it's one of the oldest and largest zoos in all of America. So it's got a crazy history. It's huge. It's got a lot of examples. So, the first thing that I need to establish is that just being able to see animals is not really valuable in and of itself. Specifically, what can you get from just seeing animals that you can't get from your phone or from TV? This isn't just a modern kids are on their phone too much thing. This is like something that zoos have been having to deal with since the public consumers started having a TV. And on that note, on the TV, you're guaranteed to have a narrative, to have something interesting and new. When in zoos, the animals are sitting there a lot of the time. The animals could be sleeping, they could all be inside because it's raining or it's cold. There isn't much of an objective value to seeing animals that you can't get from seeing them digitally. Mm-hmm. But of course that isn't the end of the story. It's not, well, who cares about those animals? Because the zoo is a place, it is an LBE, a location-based entertainment. Like a theme park, like a museum, being in the place is part of the experience along with the product that it has. Very much so with zoos. A big pull of zoos is that you're in a place surrounded by nature and surrounded by love of animals. It's usually very calm. It's usually like a bit of greenery in the city surrounded by miles of concrete. It's nice. A lot of the early zoos in America were like parks first and foremost. And then they had some kind of collection of animals that later became a zoo. But compared to other location-based entertainment, like a theme park with rides, the entertainment isn't reliable. Like, if even something like a restaurant, which like has a physical product, and also being at a nice restaurant is part of the product. Seeing animals is just not a tangible product that you objectively get value from. Yeah. And you can say the same thing about theme parks and roller coasters, but it is a consistent experience that you are paying to experience. Yes?
It's also like, I feel like there's a lot less predictability, like you said. And so that makes it harder to like guarantee product quality.
That's interesting. That's something I haven't touched on that I probably should. Zoos having to like rotate out stuff in order to keep it interesting and entertaining, because there isn't really much of a reason to go to the same zoo twice. Like, you kind of saw them all already. So there's definitely like seasonal events and such that they put on to try to drive viewership, to drive visitorship during a specific season. But like, and there is the pull of like, oh, we've got something new. Oh, we've got babies. Oh, we've revamped something. But a lot of the zoo's time is just being the same thing for like 20 years. And that's interesting. I haven't written something specifically on that. But yeah, the product, all of the products are living.
They're alive, they're guys.
They're living. They can't take the cold, they can't take the rain. They might want to be inside or outside. They don't specifically care about giving you a good experience. They're not on the payroll. So it's different from other location-based environments. Even something like a museum, where you could say getting to look at stuff that you can look at online isn't also isn't really an objective value, it is consistent, and if you're the type of person who goes to museums, you know what you're going to museums for, you know?
Yes.
But that is another case where the main pull of it is education and like kind of the wonder of getting to see it in real life. Even if in museums and zoos it's behind a case, it's carefully curated, it isn't in its original context. They're similar. So, last point of entertainment, can we then guarantee exciting or unique encounters with animals? People want to go to the zoo and feel like they connected with an animal personally. Like, or they want to be able to touch an animal or pet it, or like get something that they got out of it that they couldn't have just gotten online. And there are a lot of ways to pay money and get that. And also, this is why most zoos have a petting zoo of farm animals, or most zoos in New York do, just to be able to sate your appetite of petting the animals when it isn't actually like a function. And also, there's a very interesting history of farm animals at zoos. They, from the beginning, when they were like pretty prestigious places of education, as opposed to the circus, as opposed to what those commoners like, they would deny farm animals except if they had something unique. And in that one, this is about Woodward's Garden specifically in 1870s, or in the 1800s. He said, "I will take farm animals with mutations if they are pleasant and,
Yes,
and
you
inspiring.
said if they're pleasant and inspiring.
But not if they are revolting or inspire pity." It's good. He doesn't want your 3-armed lamb unless it's cute. But so, I should probably look into this more, because I feel like farm animals and this petting zoo is probably a kind of recent addition, because it certainly wasn't a thing for a long time. And it's pretty much just there to satiate the ability to actually touch the animals, which you kind of used to be able to do at old zoos. They kind of didn't need a petting zoo for that. But so, there are also like special encounters you can pay to experience where a keeper will be there and making sure everything's fine with touching the animal, which is definitely better than it has been in the past, but there are still some concerns about it. Specifically, there was a case very recently, I think like 2023, where a zoo had a kiwi bird that you could rent to like be able to pet and hold. And one, kiwis are completely nocturnal and should not be seeing the sun like at all. And two, kiwis are incredibly sacred and protected to the indigenous people of Australia. Like, you are not allowed to touch a kiwi. That is like an established thing. And also, like, I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to import a kiwi out of Australia, even for zoo work. But in that case, though, the second point is interesting. The main thing is that this is a nocturnal animal that was being pet by people in the daylight. So there's definitely still concerns with that, even though I do think most of them are taking an effort to make sure that the animal likes being handled and is familiar to new people. But like, that's something that they kind of have to offer. Like, they're offering small things to satiate the urge to pet the animals, because why else would you go to a zoo?
To look at fish.
To look at fish.
To look at fish.
What's my last point? Yeah, and there are many examples of zoos in the past prioritizing guest entertainment over the animal's well-being. That's kind of what zoos were back then. I have a big thing in my script of just like, hey, list some obvious examples of zoos in the past prioritizing entertainment over animal care, and I couldn't think of any because just like that's just how they were back then. That's how it was back then. Nowadays, they very much care about animal care. They very much care about education as their primary goal. But no, yeah, there are a lot of cases. You were only not allowed to like throw rocks at them in the 1960s. Like you were only allowed to not put your cigarette out on a bear's nose in the 1960s.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about this. I don't think the bear would.
But yeah, it's hard not to prioritize the guest experience because they're the ones who give you money. They're the people that you need to come to the zoo to get money. So zoos have thought of like a lot of ways to give unique experiences that you can't just get at home, that both include and don't include like actually physically getting to interact with animals. But it's very much a puzzle. Like, it's not as simple as other pieces of entertainment where you have human actors who can
like say, I'm not okay with this and shit.
You are doing this for a job. You are doing this for money. Like, and even other stuff of like waiters, just other stuff where humans
the animals.
where humans can facilitate the interaction and the product. Like, it's tricky at zoos because there kind of isn't any consequence to harming the animals, but obviously there is. And zoos nowadays really do care about animal care. And there was a huge backlash, like, there was one after World War II, and then there was one in, like, the 2000s. After World War II was when they stopped being very evil and, like, just having cages. And in the, like, 90s, 2000s is when they started pivoting to very big naturalistic enclosures, which is kind of their goal
which is
for
what
today.
They should be.
Yeah. So yeah, it's hard not to prioritize entertainment over everything else because that's how they get money. But zoos today are very much trying to be in this balance, but it's tricky. It's very tricky. Okay, that's the end of section 1, entertainment. Should I end the recording here, or do you want to do, like, questions?
I'll ask some questions.
Yay!
The question.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's more of a statement. I love aquariums. I love looking at fish, and to me, even if a fish or a seal or a similar silly little animal that I like, even if they're not being particularly interesting, I still like it quite a bit. What say you to this?
That's true. That's very much that's true. That's very much a situation where interacting with the animals is not even on the table. There is not an animal you can interact with. You might be able to see the keepers interacting with them, with felines or other feeding time kind of animals, but aquariums are very much a situation where you can't really have a one-on-one experience.
But I like them.
But I like.
But they're fish. They're funny fish.
Uh-huh.
They're balala. I will say, I guess my question is, I don't know if this is still what you're focusing on, but I think I'd like to see more of the sort of like the exoticism.
That's my other sections.
Oh, cool. then I don't have questions because I guess I have an argument, which is that I feel like a lot of the draw of seeing an animal in person is that you're seeing an exotic animal that shouldn't be here in person, which is why petting zoos are kind of different, is because you get to touch them.
Yeah.
You normally can't touch like a pig.
A pig is one of the ones you can.
Yeah, I know. But like not if you just like see one. You don't go up and pick and. I would.
They had woolly pigs at the Bronx Zoo petting zoo. They were covered in hair. They had like Doberman fur patterns. They're so cute. Look up woolly pigs, woolly hogs. But yeah, with aquariums is an interesting case, and there probably is some more research I should do specifically. One of the things I saw when researching is that there aren't as many low quality aquariums. Like, it's kind of, you can't set up a roadside aquarium. So aquariums usually come off as like nobler than zoos. And that's also in part because you can't tell if the animal's suffering. You don't have any fucking clue. It's a fishy.
Are you still recording?
Yes.
Cool. I'm gonna wait to do my dishes till later then, so there's not the water sound.
Okay, we're doing a Q&A. I'm about to pause the recording if you want to do it.
Then I can do an assistant.
Yay! Okay.
And now you're on it.
We're just on about aquariums,
Hey,
Iris.
Cass, that was the soup.
Okay, you were saying?
But aquariums, it's hard to tell if the animal is suffering. You can't.
That's true.
Most people can't really tell. But also, you usually have to have a higher budget to set up an aquarium as opposed to
'cause
setting up a zoo.
It's a lot of water, and you have to have something that can hold that much water, and it's just so much goddamn weight. But like,
But
yeah.
the animals are like less personalized, more replaceable. Like to be able to keep an aquarium running versus like keeping a zoo running once it's already set up.
The fish don't usually have names in the same way that like mammalian animals do.
And a lot of aquariums kind of use it as like setting, as like an interesting, fun part of the wall versus like what you're here for.
Right.
And they're able to. And of course, in the 2000s, a lot of the big backlash against zoos was also against aquariums and like stuff like SeaWorld. That was huge. That really, that like cultural moment was what really put pressure on a lot of zoos and aquariums. But yeah, it's interesting. And if I'm focusing on the New York zoos specifically, they have 4 zoos and 1 aquarium, which would be interesting to look into the history of. Because I don't really know the history. It's at Coney Island. It's fun.
It is.
I know the history of everything. Ask me a question.
But yeah, aquariums are different in that. Okay, I got it. They're able to use the animal as a pleasant setting and part of the experience more so than zoos are. Like even if they have a nice enclosure that like what animal is in there, if you can't really see the animal, it's not really adding to the setting or to like the environment.
Right.
While aquariums, they pretty consistently can have the fish wall and the seal wall.
Fish.
The seal wall.
Seal wall. Yeah, it's interesting. It's different.
Yeah, it's not something I was just curious because like I think it is different because like whenever I go to a fucking aquarium, I am also autistic about fish. I do see them and I start like clapping. So Iris has seen it. When I see fish, I start clapping.
When you see food. Do you have any other questions?
Not on this section.
Okay, yippee. Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording now. That was 18 minutes. Nice. Alright, this is the second session of the first recording, where I'm going to be talking about education. Ooh. So, along with the question, what do zoos sell you? This is an obvious other one, and also kind of the main, more important goal currently. This is one of their big, like, tenets right now, and a little bit like what they it's not what they rebranded to be, because zoos have always been trying to be places of education for the commonplace. But it's very much something that they're really focusing on now. And that's a good thing. So, some of my problems that I have with education at zoos is that it is very sanitized. It's very one-size-fits-all, because unlike other kinds of education, you're not working with one kid that you know that you can like follow. Mm-hmm. It has to be for everybody. It has to be for anyone who is at the zoo or will ever be at the zoo. So there's a lot of censoring of topics like death and fornication that are very natural for animals and often very important to understand them. And also a censoring of a bit of the context that they're from, of the people in the area they're from, and not just like the environment that they're from.
Yes.
And in terms of that, like a bit of a censoring of political affairs that are going on that can lead to the external forces that can lead to their conservation or not. Mm-hmm. fuck. Is that all I have for education? I'm fucked. I'm fucked. Yeah, the education can't really be intricate. It's oftentimes a lot of little plaques or little games.
And it's also, like, it has to be entertaining, I've noticed.
That's another thing. It's very much a supplement to getting to see the animal. You see the animal and then you get a little bit of context about them, a few interesting facts about them that set them apart from other animals. But you are seeing the animal inherently devoid of context being placed here. So the plaques serve as that kind of context, and it is fully like controlled by the zoo and a bit sanitized.
Yeah.
And
And
I
you
don't
don't-
have for education. Continue.
Well, what else do you want to include?
That was my main point. I suppose I should look for specific examples of education being like sanitized or kitty. Zoos do other forms of education too. Like, kitty.
They do.
Yeah, what other forms of education do zoos do? During a lot of the entertaining sections, like the sea lion feeding, or anywhere where a keeper is interacting with the animals, there usually is education baked into that. That's where they list off all of the fun facts and all of the animal's history. The animal's personal history is usually not part of the equation. You usually don't see, except for apes, you usually don't see the name of the animal in the enclosure, even if it does have one, and they usually do behind the scenes. There isn't a history of how they got to the zoo, and that there is a lot of different ways that they can. When I worked at the zoo, some of the animals were pets, like exotic pets that had been rescinded to the zoo, that had been taken from the owner. For instance, we had a skunk. There was a skunk who had its scent gland removed, so it couldn't spray anymore. And it was somebody in New York's exotic pet that they had to surrender to the zoo. And zoos breed animals with each other and send them to each other. And also trapping from the wild. That's where a lot of zoo animals used to come from. They don't really anymore, but I'm sure it is still the case for some animals. And there are a lot of animals that, like, were from the wild, were in a preserve for a bit, and then couldn't recover and reintegrate into the wild, so they were relocated to zoos. But yeah, the animals themselves have a lot of, like, personality. They have names, they have stories, they have relationships with the other animals in the enclosure. And recently there's been kind of, with like TikTok and like very informal information that you can get, that like the keepers can make without any real like purpose for it, I guess. There has been a lot of like getting to know personal animals, getting to know their names and their stories. And that's an interesting fact too. There was an article that I still have to read about death at zoos and how zoos talk about death, saying that there is never any kind of graveyard for the animals at zoos, which seems like obvious, but also like, no, that like those
That's
are the,
weird.
yeah, those are the animals of the zoo. On that note, I think the Bronx Zoo has they have an extinction graveyard. It's like a fake little graveyard for animals that went extinct, like, recently, saying, like, the year that they were discovered and the year that they died as, like, the years on their tombstone with a picture of them. It's very cute and sad. Bronx Zoo had cyclines. Is that, how do you say it?
Cyclones?
Cyclines, those stripy things. Bronx Zoo had them. Some of the last footage of them was at the Bronx Zoo.
I know what you're talking about. I don't remember what they're called, but that's
The
goes away.
yeah, they went away. Some of the last footage of them was at the Bronx Zoo.
Frown. It's not good.
But yeah, external media where you get to really know the animals, where they're really like personified. The zoo TV show is important to note here. That was filmed at the Bronx Zoo. I'm pretty much sure it was like wholly the Bronx Zoo, and it did a lot to bring the public's opinion of zoos up. To like go behind the scenes, see that they are caring for the animals, see that that's their top priority when it was really down in the like 2000s. And this is information that I found when I was looking at the like current director of the Bronx Zoo. It was an interview with him, and they were bragging in the description about how he like brought the zoo's reputation back with that TV show. And working at the Bronx Zoo, and at the Prospect Park Zoo. Okay, I guess it's the WCS zoos then. We had plaques saying like, "Have you seen this animal on the zoo? Here it is in person." When I was working there, they had just put out a video on 2 Pallas cats enclosures. Like the entire episode is making their enclosures. So I was told like a lot of people might be here specifically to see the Pallas cats. This is where they are. There's a big sign on the anteater at the Bronx Zoo. She's very cute. She's very sweet. When I was working there, I also saw my bosses in the episodes as like when they were in my position. Like they interviewed the lower zookeepers, and it was my current boss, and I was like, oh, look at them like 5 years ago. That was really sweet.
Yeah, I keep remembering you worked at a zoo.
Yes, I worked at the Prospect Park Zoo and the Bronx Zoo.
I would work at a zoo. I sure hope there's no video that informs me on some of the maybe ethical qualities that might come with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's okay. I still want to work there.
No, of course. I think you should, like, jokes aside, if you're going to work somewhere, you should know what's fucked up about it. Because there always no ethical anything ever. That's the famous quote.
This is my field. But that was
Have you heard
pretty...
it from
That was pretty much the only example of the show being incorporated into the park. It's in the Butterfly Garden. There's a screen that plays the Butterfly Garden episode of the zoo, and it's only like 2 minutes, I think, on loop, and that's where I saw my boss. But then there are also the plaques saying, like, have you seen this animal in the zoo? But I feel like there probably should be more of that personalization in the zoo experience without having to go on TikTok or watch the...
Without having to rely on trends, yeah.
Because I feel like that really gets people's empathy up. If they know the animal's name, if they know its history. And a lot of times zookeepers will be able to tell that information if they're like there. But I think that making zoos like more personalized in that factor and know like how the animals got there, what the important work they're doing is definitely a way that zoos can go in the future.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That wasn't a point in my video at all.
You should. And now you have it.
Yeah, now I have it. Now I have something for the education portion. And I have an excuse to talk about the zoo and how it rehabilitated the zoo's image.
And you get to bring in actual lived experience as someone who's been in zoos. Which is very...
That I'll be able to film, too.
Yeah.
Yay! Whee! That was great. That's awesome.
And it's all thanks to me.
And it's all thanks to you. Okay, do you have any questions for the education portion?
Not really.
Okay, yeah.
I feel informed.
Okay, yeah, let me write that down.
I feel so informed.
Okay, section 3 is brand. Back to the question of what do zoos sell you. This is everything else. This is all of the plushies, all of the themed food and the themed cafes. This is the general environment.
The merchandise.
The merchandise. Now, okay, just talking about the plushies, there's a lot to go into. There's some interesting stuff. Notably, if you buy this plushie, you are adopting a real animal. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, that was a conservation thing that you can do at zoos. It's kind of like buying a star. It's like if you buy this overpriced plushie, we will tell you it is connected to a real life animal that you helped conserve, that you specifically helped, because all of the money from them goes to animal conservation. It is like you are sponsoring a real animal's real rescue. But it's also like the buying a star thing. So that's interesting. That like puts a moral price onto plushies. And plushies you can find in zoos are generally pretty different than other kinds of animal plushies you can buy. I remember specifically at the Central Park Zoo, they had all kinds of like very, very specific animal plushies. That's where I got my gray silky chicken plushie and my weird little goat plushie. But they had all kinds of wild animals and all kinds of animals that they specifically had at that zoo. The Bronx Zoo is also huge in this. They have like specific vendors who make like a wide variety of animals for the zoo. I remember my friend Abson got like a weird big goose plushie. Like zoos specifically have, or at least the New York City zoos have like very specific merchandise. They have a lot of like conservation based merchandise. They have a lot of like the plastic in this bracelet was collected from the sea, so you're helping depollute the ocean. And of course the like save an animal plushie things that I mentioned. It's very overpriced in a similar way to like how theme park stuff is overpriced once you're like in there. And there's a lot of comparisons to be made specifically with like Disney parks and stuff, where they're specifically creating an environment and creating the merchandise there that you don't just have an animal plush, you have an animal plush that you will associate with the zoo and your memories at the zoo forever. Moving on from plushies, food is also very hyped up, but I remember, oh my god, the Bronx Zoo has the Dancing Crane Cafe, which does have cranes around it who can take your food. That's an interesting thing to talk about with branding too. The New York City zoos have wild animals on purpose. They have peacocks running everywhere. They have peacocks, they have weird ducks. Like, there are animals that are allowed to free roam that are part of the zoo experience and are exotic animals. Like, part of my job when I worked at the Bronx Zoo was to make sure that kids didn't try to chase the peacocks or, like, steal a tail feather. And in general, like, to keep an eye on them. But they're not escaped. Like, it's part of the environment that they're around.
Yeah, I know a bit about that one.
And okay, yeah, this is a good segue into my next point. Along with like being in some beautiful nature in a pocket of the city, another big thing about zoos is having like animals, having you be able to experience animal senses even when you're not there. Like the sound of being at the zoo, you can often hear like gibbons from across the zoo. You can hear the animals. That's a very valuable part of the experience. And of course, being able to see them. Ideally being able to touch them, but they usually don't let you. But they do often let you touch like the greenery and such around them. But one thing that is not valued in zoos at all is smell. The natural smell of the animals. If you're at a zoo exhibit and you can smell the animals, you think that they're not caring for them right. You think that that's bad care. If you go to an animal exhibit and it smells like shit, you're like, they're not cleaning after them. But that's how it would be in the wild, and oftentimes that's more comfortable for the animal. But that is something that is completely unacceptable as part of your zoo experience. So even though it is authentic, and zoos, especially now, are striving for authenticity, that is not something that is valued, or that you should ever be able to see, or to smell. And that is because even though authenticity is what they're aiming for, it is not the end goal. The end goal is something that's pleasant and exotic and wild, but overall pleasant. You don't want to be fucking chopping through vines and leaves to get to the next animal exhibit. Like, it's for you. You're the customer. Mm-hmm. And part of that is having a pleasant experience. On what I said in education, like, you might not want your child to be confronted with the horrors of colonization. you're here for a fun day with the animals. Like, it's not just that the zoo itself is trying to pander to little kids or whatever.
No, yeah.
Yeah, it's a family experience. They very much built up the zoo as like a family day. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not solely focused on being accurate. It is a consumable, pleasant version of the wildlife that's just for you. Other things in brand. Advertising. I was thinking of possibly looking into how zoos advertise today versus how they used to. I have a bunch of Bronx Zoo stuff specifically. I probably won't have a full section on this unless I have like extra time, but I'm definitely going to use it as like visuals to illustrate what I'm talking about. But it is interesting. Like zoos' current advertising is it's a very like specific aesthetic of like come visit the wild. Come on out. Come on out.
Come to my wild world.
Come to my wild world. And it might be interesting to look into how like TikTok and YouTube, especially over COVID, made the New York City zoos adapt and kind of get stronger. Like the New York City zoos started having during COVID started having the keepers who were still there because they still had to care about the animals, like make videos using the fact that the park was completely empty and being able to like just focus on the animals. And also they had like cameras going on their website with like 24 access video of the enclosures. You know about that? They had like cams of the specific exhibits. So they were able to kind of make COVID into like something where you can still interact with the zoo. And they also reopened a bit too early, but they were able to use the reopening as like, we're back! Come in, everybody, please! Please, oh, please come in. I worked there spring 2021, and most of my job was telling people to keep their masks on. Making sure they don't touch the animals and telling people to keep their masks on.
They want to get their fingers bitten off, you jerk.
Exactly. Oh my god, the butterfly garden. Okay, I was also saying if there's other stuff that I wasn't able to put into other sections, I can talk about my experience working there during this section, because it was my job to kind of keep up the brand, keep up the illusion. The butterfly garden specifically, there is one music track playing on repeat. It's one violin mythical fairy track playing on repeat, which my coworkers didn't like for some reason. And part of my job at the butterfly exhibit is to tell people not to touch the butterflies and not to. Little boys would come in and just clap their hands.
I used to do that! Because I was a boy. And boys have to. You don't understand, when you tell them not to do that, it's really shitty. Because they're boys. They can't help it, they're boys.
Those were the biggest worries. And Instagram influencers. 20-year-old woman who wanted a photo op in the butterfly garden of them holding a butterfly, and that's why they paid to come into the butterfly garden. They were the other biggest threat. We had to tell people you are not allowed to touch the butterflies unless they land on you first. Because they would straight up just be trying to grab the butterflies for their picture. But another part of my job working at the butterfly garden was to make sure there weren't any butterflies on the ground, dead. I would see a butterfly on the ground, and my job would be to pick it up by the wings like this, and fling it up into the air, and then it would fly away. But also, like, to keep them out of the nectar bowl, the nectar that they eat out of, they get stuck in, and it's my job to make sure people can't see that. There's a little koi pond. I have to keep them away from the koi pond. Oftentimes, I would fish them out of the koi pond and put them on a rock to dry. I would have to find a rock that the visitors couldn't see, like that's hidden in the little valley, and I would put them there to dry. And oftentimes, they would get dry and fly away. But like part of my job was to keep up the illusion, was to make it not a place where death is acknowledged.
Yeah,
for the kids.
Butterflies can't die.
Butterflies can't die. They're beautiful. For the kids.
I can't die because I'm beautiful.
You got that because you're beautiful. So yeah. that's another thing here with Brand is that like it's not just zoos doing it, it is the job of the people who work at zoos to keep this up like running. Okay. All right. Okay. To segue into the next section, another big thing with zoos and the experience of being at the zoo and the architecture there is that they try to make it look like the country that the animal is from or a vague wildness.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, animals that don't actually live together are grouped together just kind of based on vibe or based on, like, the animals that do work together and can cohabitate. But, yeah. To end off the Brand section, to segue into the next section, the architecture at zoos isn't just, like, a vague wilderness. It is a specific wilderness. It is quite specific. And everything else that I've said about the zoos having a single sanitized story and about being a place that you go for your experience, not to question anything, to be served, this little patch of greenery in the middle of the city, is about to come to a head. Okay, any questions before I end the recording?
Not for this one.
Okay, yeah.
I think that one was pretty concise.
Yay.
I do have something I need to show you.
Alright, section 4, racism. This is what the whole video has been building up to, yeah. So, what I mentioned in the last section, and consistently, of them trying to make an exotic, wild feel, most of the time, this is just places from around the world. There is an Amazon rainforest exhibit at the Bronx Zoo, there is a Congo world, there is African plains, there is Tiger Mountain, which is themed specifically, and there is Wild Asia, which has been renamed to Asia, which I don't even know if that's better, honestly.
I just got 2D in Mooded. Okay, continue.
And it still says Wild Asia some places, like on the monorail. Zoo's original intent. Okay, no. The menageries that would become the modern zoo were powerful white men's collection of animals from all around the world that they have conquered. And even now, when early American zoos had conservation and education as their top priority, like the Bronx Zoo did, they were founded pretty exclusively to preserve the American bison that was about to go extinct because of colonialism. There's still the draw of come and see this animal that you can't see anywhere else because it isn't from around here. You don't go to a zoo to see raccoons. All of the most popular zoo animals are big, strong animals that are a representative of where they're from. Mm-hmm. They're often the first thing that you think of when you think of Africa or India. And for a lot of kids, they're like, this is the... Okay, I can't say that exactly. I don't know if this is a point I'm going to make in the video, but I was interested in seeing if lions are more thought of as like a zoo animal or a circus animal than like an African animal in like the children's consciousness, because lions are crazy popular. They're like one of the most popular animals. One of the Bronx Zoo's biggest draws is just that it has lions. It's the only one of the New York City zoos to have lions. But yeah, what the zoo is the spoils from all around the world localized entirely in the middle of your city for you to view and for you to be able to experience. And that, it goes without saying, is a little, isn't neutral of context. While most zoo animals nowadays are from other zoos that have breeding programs, they were originally captured from the wild, and that was part of colonialism and of the pilfering of resources from other parts of the world. Specifically, like, lions have a huge history of that. I have an evil ass quote from the first director of the Bronx Zoo, saying, "Oh, how dare they think that they care about such animals when when they should be grateful because we're the ones bringing them to them. Why they have no reason to care if we kill 20 lions in Africa for them to have one lion in America." Because that's a lion that they get to see. That's the product that they're here to buy. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess. I didn't know you could just say shit like that.
That's
okay.
Like Disney villain ass.
Literally. Okay, let me read out the quote, actually, because I do have the quote written down.
Blocks and shit, 'cause I'm in fucking Minecraft. I'm placing blocks and shit, 'cause I'm in fucking Minecraft. Oh my god. Is that fucking pig? Because I'm in Minecraft.
Oh yes, it's in this section. Sorry, I was reading all that. Okay, this is William Hornaday. He comes up a lot. He really comes up a lot in this section. He was I don't remember if he was the first director of the zoo or just one, like the second, but he was in the 1902 is when this quote is from. If the violence and brutality of capturing wild animals were to get to the newspapers, there would be things published in condemnation of the whole business of capturing wild animals for exhibition. Hornaday complained of the many cranks who are so terribly sentimental that they affect to believe that it is wrong to capture wild animals and exhibit them, even for the benefit of millions of people. For Hornaday, the work of zookeeping was heroic. It was better, he said, to bring wild animals from the remote corners of the earth to the urban centers of civilization, where they would be of more benefit to the world than they were in the jungles of Nepal and seen only at rare intervals by a few ignorant natives. In both New York and San Francisco, the immeasurable sacrifices and suffering of animals in distant places were invisible to the customers of zoos. So that's another thing. The public didn't know about this. Even back then, when they probably wouldn't have cared anyway, like, it was kept secret. It was kept hush-hush. Crazy. That's from William Hornaday. He comes up a lot. It's crazy. But, like, that's really fucking cut and dry. And even though the zoos don't explicitly, like, that isn't, the goal of this is conservation and education and getting people to have empathy for animals. They are still menageries of animals from around the world, concentrated where they are of more use to you to be able to view them.
Oh, God.
And in that, the architecture, they are trying to bring you the spoils from around the world. They are trying to give you a sanitized, exotic experience that you can enjoy and not have to think about the context or the implications. Bronx Zoo, like I said, has all of those specific sections. They have the Asia section, which I have to see how it's organized when I get there, but I'm pretty sure it's not by countries in Asia. I'm pretty sure it's by, these are the big cats of Asia, these are the huge elephants of Asia. But I'll have to see when I get there. What was I saying? At the Memphis Zoo also, that's another zoo that I've been to a lot because that's where my mom's family's from. It is completely ancient Egyptian themed. Like, it is made to look like you are walking into their idea of ancient Egypt. There's, like, canals on the ground and shit. Crazy. They also have pandas, which are in, like, a fake little Chinese, like, pavilion.
They love to do a fake little Chinese pavilion.
Complete with, like, they have a lot of, because the pandas take up so much space, because they're a really rare animal to have, and they need a lot of space, They have a lot of shit in the Chinese panda house that is like Zen gardens and like information about like Chinese practices. I'm probably not gonna be able to go there for the video again, but I could probably get footage. They also just have like Native American styled totem poles next to like the
Yeah, they
the
had
eagle.
that in my fucking. They had a lot of that shit in the Detroit Zoo too, or the Toledo Zoo actually.
And yeah, okay, indigenous people especially is really, there's a lot to talk about. Because a lot of, like I said, the Bronx Zoo was specifically about the bison, and the fact that they were going extinct because of colonization just was not really a given. There was a lot of, back then, there was a lot of both sides in it saying like, oh yeah, we are killing them, but they were killing them too. It's not like they had anything to do. Ugh. But, yeah, it's, you get the aesthetics, you get to feel cultured, you get to feel like you paid money for the conservation of wild animals, like you're doing a moral thing. And you get to enjoy everywhere around the world, brought here just for you, sanitized just for you, with nothing that could challenge your worldview or make you feel bad, because that's not your part as the customer. It very much, like, oftentimes positions these other parts of the world as untamed and, like, untouched by humans as can be. Like, the specific quote from one of my readings was, equally wild places with equally wild people. Like, the idea is, oh, no, capitalism isn't destroying the world. Everything's right here. You're helping pay for conservation. Here's everything in its original place. Here's where it's supposed to be. Here's how everything's supposed to be. Like, creating a vision of, like, an animal's natural environment that even then is, like, divorced from the context of how the people that lived with them interacted with them, or how they have evolved since. It's very, like, genetic purity, you know? Like, it's very
Weird.
this is how this animal has always lived. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Okay, what I was saying earlier about the sanitized story divorced from context. Yeah, this is what I meant. This is what I was talking about. There's also very much cases where, partially due to like lack of context and elaboration, they paint other cultures in a negative light. Tiger Mountain at Bronx Zoo specifically. This is a specific example that I'm going to be able to film. They have a fake poacher's truck, and the whole exhibit is saying that poachers are the danger to wild tigers. It is poachers in their natural environment that are killing tigers for money. The poacher's van is, you can like walk in it, you can interact with it. It's like, they got like fake claws and pelts and shit hung up. Like, look at these evil poachers. They also have fake medicine that they say, these people are killing tigers for. And that
Isn't that just indigenous people?
yeah, that is not just saying they're killing them for money, and that's saying they're killing them for their backwards beliefs, for their science, their backwards, uninformed pseudoscience. It does not have the context for why poachers have to kill animals to sell them for money for their families. It is very much painting the poachers as like a predator of the animal, like it was part of like that place's ecosystem, you know? It's divorced of the context of why there are poachers. And it comes off painting them in a negative light and saying, we are the ones who need to conserve the tigers. We need to bring them here so we can take care of them. Like, it's very
We
white,
gotta take care of them outside of their natural habitat.
where we can monitor them because we know better.
'Cause we
Like,
know
it's
better.
white saviorism.
Yeah, lots of. Ugh.
And that's another point I want to go into with conservation. A lot of it is going into natural places for the sake of the animals and not caring about the sake of the people.
Right.
I should look up specific examples for this because I don't have specific examples right now, but I'm sure there are modern examples of like going into the Amazon rainforest for the special frog there and not caring about the rest of it. Because the conservation and like the vision of conservation that they're trying to sell to children and saying like, oh, you're part of by buying our plushies
Ugh.
is a noble goal, but and even though I've been saying education and science and teaching kids is a noble goal, science has been used to justify a lot of horrible, horrible things. Like, okay, going into human zoos, because I have a lot of writing on human zoos, and specifically the Bronx Zoo. The Bronx Zoo had a guy. The Bronx Zoo had people. William Hornaday had a guy.
What?
Okay. So at the 1902, I think, World Fair, you know the World Fairs that they used to have?
Yes.
They had an exhibition of just natives from all around the world. Because Charles Darwin's book had just come out and said evolution is real, and that book made the theory that, oh, okay, these natives and these Africans are proof of evolution because they are the missing link between us and apes. It goes us at the top, and then the natives, and then the apes.
That's not true. But that's not true.
But that wasn't just like fringe racists. That was the scientific understanding at the time.
Right.
That was people thinking that they were being objective. They weren't being racist. They found a use for them. They found they have a scientific use. So they were exhibited in a sort of zoo in their quote-unquote natural habitats. Like it wasn't just they were sitting there. They put in the work to like try to recreate their like living spaces. It was a scientific endeavor. It was accepted at the time. It was like the top researchers at the time saying this is proof of evolution. This is proof that evolution is real.
That's so awesome.
And so so the person that they had at the Bronx Zoo, his name was Ota Benga. He was an African pygmy. He was around 3 feet tall, even though he was, I think, 23.
Mm-hmm.
His teeth were also filed into points because that was what they did to that. That's how the young men in that tribe did.
Yeah.
They said he is a natural cannibal. You can tell by the teeth, and they surrounded him with bones. He was originally at the World Fair, and then taken back to Africa, and then taken back to New York by a guy whose name I wrote down somewhere else. And then they tried to put him in the Met at the same time, or no, this was a little bit before, P.T. Barnum in his circus had a black man in an ape suit as the missing link between animals and people. And this was also in New York. So this was both used in freak shows and such, and was the scientific consensus. But so...
Awesome.
So this guy tried to bring Ota Benga to the Met, the museum of something that I've been to a lot, and they had him there for a bit, and then they relocated him to the Bronx Zoo, where he was put inside of the monkey house with the apes, and he was there for 20 days, where he was really, really, really crazy popular. Some of the biggest, like at the time, the biggest amount of people who had come to the Bronx Zoo were there to see the guy. And also, because this was a 19,000 zoo, they could throw rocks and shit at him and poke him. He was positioned as an intermediary step between apes and humans, but he was also there to be friends with the apes because they were friends. And when people were protesting about this, specifically black ministers and also other ministers and churches in New York, because they were already against evolution, and they were saying, like, this is cruel, that's a person. It's very, very obviously a person.
Yeah.
And a group of black ministers said, like, we have an orphanage for black children, give him to us. we'll take care of him, we'll get him an education. But it's interesting because, okay, that is a really interesting part of the documentary, that, like, Christian groups were specifically the ones who were most against evolution, but also against the racism that came with it, because they were saying, no, very obviously all humans were created by God and we're all equal. Like, that, it's interesting. It's interesting.
It is a really interesting side effect of just sort of like the world.
It's interesting how things interlock.
Headlock.
But so then after protests there, and the New York Times was on William Hornaday's side. William Hornaday said he's not a prisoner, he's part of the exhibition, he likes it here. He if he didn't want to be here, he could do something else.
Could he?
No.
Yeah, okay.
William Hornaday also said, like, he likes it here. He gets to chill.
I don't know if I buy that. Honestly.
After all of the protests, William Hornaday gave him over just because he wanted to stop dealing with the protests. He didn't have a change of heart or anything. He just thought it was really annoying. So
You fellas gonna watch anything?
I'm talking about my project. So
Oh.
yes, I need another like 30 minutes. But so
We could move to your room.
that's true. So the Black Ministry group took him in, and they didn't really have the resources to take care of him, though. He always wanted to go back to Africa, but they couldn't because World War I stuff was about to start. So they couldn't really move internationally. He ended up, he was relocated to Virginia, and then he ended up killing himself 10 years later. And I'm saying this because then the New York Times, which was one of the articles defending them keeping him as a scientific endeavor back when he was still at the Bronx Zoo, published an article, they published an obituary for him saying he was actually a zookeeper. He was on the payroll, but the public saw him in the monkey house, and because they were racist, they thought that they were keeping him prisoner. But he was actually a zookeeper. He was actually paid.
Oh, how obvious.
That's a crazy thing to imply. Obviously untrue. They were the ones who published the article saying, yeah, he's a person. It's scientific. That's crazy to me because it's like the fucking Twitter ass, aren't you the real racists for thinking about racism?
Yeah. No.
It's so funny. I didn't know that people like that existed back then. I didn't know that arguments like that existed back then.
Arguments have always existed for all time.
But then the public just like 100% didn't know about him until like the 1990s. And then people have published books and documentaries, which is where I've gotten this information.
Right.
And then in 2021, the Bronx Zoo published an official like statement saying, "We are deeply, deeply sorry for ever having had a person. He was a person. This is where you can learn about him. We're sorry for covering this up." Good statement. Well made. But it was in 2021, which is not great.
Took him a while, huh?
Took them a while, and took them specifically this documentary that I got this information from. That came out in like late 2019, so I kind of feel like it might have been a little bit direct. It might have been a bit of a direct consequence. But yeah, in general, this was viewed as the exact same conservation of scientific animals that zoos are still based on. That is the point of zoos.
That's weird.
It's so bad. It's so bad. And this tie between like authenticity and exoticism is still a thing. When I'm saying a bunch of zoos want to have more authentic enclosures, that means they want it to feel like the country, not just like the environment. The African Plains exhibit in the Bronx Zoo was their first barless open enclosure. This was like a huge deal at the time, and it was also based on Africa. There was that implication of Africa with being wild and of being able to like see things how they naturally are before human interaction.
It's not good.
The Bronx Zoo also currently has, near the baboons, in the like kind of, they have like a fake little African village with like thatch roof huts where you can get a hot dog and like vaguely tribal looking masks and stuff. It's bad. It's not good. Very much, zoos aren't just selling you the ability to see these wild animals from all over the world. They are taking you all around the world to get to see these animals where they are. And the answer is not to like sterilize them and remove them from the context. That's not the answer. I don't just want
Yeah.
But I think that zoos haven't really addressed the fact that that's kind of what they are. And, you know?
Yeah, it's not really something that they would want to address.
This is another big point. Okay, this isn't the most concrete statistic. It is from a hiring website, which says that they get their information from the places that they have articles on, and also from like insider stuff. But it isn't a scientific statistic. But I also saw it cited in other things, specifically think pieces from Black zookeepers that were saying like, yeah, this is an issue that needs to be resolved. This is what I'm doing to try to resolve it. The statistic was that only 4% of zookeepers are Black. That's crazy
incredibly
low.
low. Wow.
That's incredibly low. That's crazy.
You keep saying things and I keep being like, that can't be right, and knowing in my heart that it in fact can be right.
A amazing podcast that I watched. I was thinking of possibly asking to interview this woman because she's a Black woman who works in zoos and went on a podcast talking about it. She said on her reasons of like why aren't Black people in general interested in zookeeping was the fact that there aren't really any notable Black zookeepers to be role models and to inspire like people to also want to take that up. 2, it is not a very financially stable job. It really isn't paid that well. You kind of can't like base your whole life over security in being a zookeeper, speccing into being a zookeeper. It's kind of
my zookeeper specs.
The guy she was interviewing on the podcast, who runs the podcast, was like, "Oh yeah, even though I'm like pretty well off, and my wife I had a second job when I was a zookeeper, like even though I was doing pretty well."
That's not good.
And yeah, that zoos are often like it costs money to go to them as well. Like it's very much a cycle that's kind of repeating itself, you know?
Yeah.
Those articles I talked about that were from Black men saying like, yeah, I'm the only Black person at my zoo. I have a TikTok. Come watch me talk about this stuff and raise awareness for this. He said he was at another zoo and saw a Black man and assumed he was a janitor before realizing he was a zookeeper, like him. And he literally just that realization that that's like the base assumption was like, I need to do something about this. And I think that a lot of, not just the people that you see at zoos, that you see when you go to zoos, but the people behind the scenes who are making the educational content for zoos and who are making like the plaques and the architecture, like the people who are actually producing that, it often doesn't seem like they have a person on the team with first-hand experience, you know? I think that is very much a good first step. I need sources for that, though, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay, that's all my points. Other stuff. Okay, the Bronx Zoo specifically is pretty good about this. Of course, being in the Bronx, they also have a day that's always free. It's either Tuesdays or Wednesdays, I'm not sure. But they very much make an effort to get the community and the youth interested in zoos.
Right.
They also, the WCS has a lot of programs specifically for black children and black teenagers to get into the field. Like, the New York City zoos are doing a lot of work in this department. This is something that they're aware of and that they are pretty good about. But still, it's still a problem with zoos in general, and even like the fact that that zoo that I mentioned had those problems, even when. But I should probably look up some more egregious examples. One that I do have that isn't really a zoo but kind of is at Disney, at one of the Disney parks. They're not a zoo, which is spelled to look like a tribal African word that sounds like not a zoo. You know about that?
No.
It is a... Okay. I don't know what it looks like in its current incarnation, but what it was a bunch of African and indigenous looking tribal huts with African and indigenous people working them that also had animals and had its own fake lore about like fake natives and what they saw of the animals. They had like a fake temple you could explore. I need to look into this more, and I don't know if that's what it is like today, but, and it's also technically not a zoo. Even, I feel so stupid saying it. That's the name of it. That's the name of it because they were saying it's more than a zoo. It's not a zoo. You gotta come. It's more than that. Jesus Christ. It's really, really bad. And yeah, in the Memphis Zoo, there were those things that I mentioned. Even my project is about zoos as a whole, not just the Bronx Zoo.
Right.
But yeah, the fact that the Bronx Zoo is one of the more, if I look into it, it's probably one of the ones that has the most diverse people working there. Both of my bosses when I worked there were black.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I saw on the zoo as employees first. So yeah, I should look into that. But the point is that the zoo is very much a World's Fair for you to come and experience everything from around the world just for you in a sanitized format, divorced from any context that might make you feel uncomfortable or bad.
I don't want to feel uncomfortable or bad. I love feeling normal and not challenged in any way.
You paid money. Why would they make you feel challenged?
Exactly.
Okay, are there any questions for this section before I move on to the conclusion?
No, it's fucked up though.
It's crazy, right?
It's fucked up.
It's crazy.
My question is that it's fucked up.
Okay, I'm gonna end this section now. Ending off with my conclusion. I don't think that all zoos should die. I think that zoos do have merit as places of education, places of animal care, places of conservation, and places for the public to connect with animals and be empathetic for them and their struggles. And I do think that they do have value as places of learning about other places in the world and their environments and the animals that live there. I just think that a lot of zoos divorce the context solely to be palatable to the viewer, and in ways that end up painting other countries in a negative light, or in an animalistic light, or in they might be well-intentioned, but they're just not as smart as us, like,
Yeah.
you know? I think that there should be more context in zoos. I think you should be able to learn where the animal you're viewing comes from, both from around the world and the specific animal that you're seeing. I think that the marketing needs to be careful to not just be selling fake versions of other countries around the world as their selling point. And that there should be people working at zoos, both on the ground and on the board, who are able to give a more nuanced perspective. I do think that the way that zoos have a exotic other and a urban person we're selling to, that separation leads to racism in hiring and in people's perceptions. I think that we need to take steps to address this and kind of reassess it. But I very much think that we can find a good middle ground of talking about other countries and learning about them in a more nuanced way and a more educational and accurate way. And that should be a main goal of zoos going forward. Because whether they intend to or not, zoos are where a lot of the customers will be learning about other countries.
Yeah.
And getting their ideas and their perspectives from. Yes. I think we need more focus on countries' history and on their presence, on the present, and what the issues are currently, and what the places look like currently. And in that, I also want to help there be more people of color in the workplace. So, in conclusion, there's hope. I just think these things need to be addressed in the future. Okay, is there any questions here for the conclusion?
No, I think it's pretty strong.
Yeah, right? It's awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah, no, wait, he's goated?
I feel really confident about the video. Okay, ending the recording.